when we were growing up, my brothers and I all knew that actually it was Mother who knew best. But it was Dad who had all the power. My dad was a force to be reckoned with in life and in our family. He was a man who literally made his living from talking. He managed a radio station, and for years he had a talk show called Air Your Opinion. And my father loved nothing more than picking a fight. He just loved a good argument, okay? Unfortunately, that huge aggressive persona that worked so well on the air lived in my house. So I want to share with you that this is only the second time I've spoken about my dad in the past tense, okay? My dad passed away in March, and it was at his funeral that my brother so eloquently described our family dynamic, which was to say, you really couldn't appreciate the hugeness of my father without acknowledging that our family worked because he was so beautifully balanced by my mother. And that was really true. My father was fun, but he was competitive and aggressive, and always trying to have fun with him, we would get left in the dust. If you went fishing as a family, my mom would bring a picnic and we would sit by a quiet lake. But if you went fishing with my dad alone, he would like weigh us down, the three kids, with rods and reels and the boxes, the tackle boxes and the nets, and then he would take off through the woods like Lewis and Clark. And you couldn't see the forest for the trees, and you were scared you were going to get left there. It was mayhem. It was mayhem. So I want to talk a little bit about the fact that that was the fun stuff. And so sometimes his bigness actually was a little worse than that. And so I am going to tell you a story tonight about what it was like to have my dad. We grew up in Western Pennsylvania. We lived in a small steel town on the Ohio River. And as a steel town, it was a cultural melting pot, for real. And what that meant was, in the early 60s, that cultural stereotypes abounded. And because it was the beginning of the civil rights movement, we were beginning to have some racial tension. Basically, we had been a racially mixed town where the races never mixed. And now we had to, and there were going to be some rocky years. So where that played out for me as an elementary school student was at school and in the playground. And I used to go to a summer program in the playground, like a day camp. And one summer day, I'm sitting at the tables, I'm doing arts and crafts with my best friend Alice, and we're so engrossed in what we're doing, we're not paying attention to what's going on until we actually feel the dynamic change at the table, like the energy changed. And we looked up and we realized that the counselors, for some reason, had scooted out early and not told anyone. And a lot of kids had left, and Alice and I were the only two white kids left. And we panicked. And one of the girls at the table said, "Yeah, you better run." So we did. Got up, took off. Alice ran really hard, and she made it out of the playground okay. I ran 4 feet and fell. And the girl, you can laugh, it's okay, all right? And the girl behind me, she's the only one that pursued us. It really was almost just, I think, too tempting for her not to, ran after us. And so when I fell, she fell over top of me. And in that minute that she was down, I got out of the playground. And I was headed home, I was limping, I had banged up my knee, I was shaken up, but I was okay. And all I could think was I was gonna get home and my dad would pull me up on his lap and everything would be okay. Okay? Now, I don't know where I got a fantasy like that, because that is about as far from my father as you can get. My father was one of 16 children raised in the coal regions with a hardscrabble family. The family philosophy was, and they were proud of it, if someone hits you, you hit him back. And if you're outnumbered, go home and get your brothers and sisters. So my dad was not the type to give me a hug. My dad said, "I want you to meet me upstairs. I want you to come to your bedroom. I want to talk to you." Now, you know that's never good, right? So I meet him upstairs. He's sitting on my bed, and he says, "So I want to teach you how to fight." I'm going to show you how to throw a punch. Now, I'm an elementary school girl. I'm a girly girl. So this is as close to a what the fuck moment as I've ever had, okay? And I just look at him, I'm speechless, and he starts. He shows me how to make a fist. He shows me how to keep that punch coming in close to the body, because if you swing wide, it'll get blocked. And then he picks up a pillow and says, I want you to throw some punches into the pillow. And I'm afraid to say no. So I try to throw a few punches, and then he realizes that I'm pathetic. And he says, okay, so you can't do that. So if you ever have trouble again, just kick her. Kick her, aim for the shins. Everybody's weak in their shins, right? And at that point, I actually found my voice. And I said to my dad, look, this is silly. I can't do this, and it doesn't matter, because I'm never going back to that playground. And he says, yes, you are. And I said, no, Daddy, I'm really never going back there. And he said, you are. You're going back tomorrow morning, because you're going to show her you're not afraid. And with no disrespect intended, I said, but Daddy, I really am afraid. And he said, you can never let someone know you're afraid. You're going back. And no amount of pleading with my mother would help. Dad had decided I was going back the next morning. Now, here's what I have figured out looking back as an adult. I told you my dad was on the radio. He knew people. I suspect my dad made several phone calls that night. I suspect there were 2 camp counselors in deep shit. I suspect my dad sent me back there knowing nothing bad would happen, because everyone would be on alert. And having me show up would demonstrate to everyone, white and black, that this was a safe place to be. Now, I still have some strong feelings about the fact that he made that statement with me. But at the same time, as our town struggled to find equity between the races, my dad was at the forefront of something called Nationality Days, which was new in those times. They decided they would celebrate everyone's culture. And they blocked off streets, and they had booths and music and food and dance, and I was proud that my dad was part of that. And that basically sums up my relationship with my dad. He wasn't warm and fuzzy. I was never going to have one of those soft, sweet little daddies. But he always had my back. He always had my back. When he got to the end of his life, he was 1 month away from being 91. His body started to crash from surgeries and procedures, and at one point, he became delirious. His body was breaking down. And my son and I were with him, and I sat with him the entire night. And the way that played out in his body is that it looked like he was fighting. I don't think that's really what was happening. I think his body was agitated, but it looked like he was fighting. And I sat next to him, and I kept thinking, Daddy, just stop. Please, now is when you can stop fighting. But at the same time, I was thinking, Daddy, please don't stop fighting, because then you'll be gone. And when hospice came in and he was given the drugs that would help him relax and his body was calm, the silence that was left was deafening. And as I sat next to him, all of the anger, because my dad and I butted heads my entire life, his entire life, we butted heads. And by the time he got to 90, I could tell he was hurt that I always seemed so critical of him. And I was hurt that he could never change. And as I sat there, that anger all went away. And all I could think was, Daddy, you know, I turned out a lot more like you than you think. Because no, I can't punch. I can't throw a physical punch. But I can take someone apart with my words, just like you. And I also thought, just once would it have killed me to admit to that man that sometimes Dad did know best. I wish I had. Thank you.